You ever noticed when the best players on the field, how they always seem to get double teamed, and it happens in basketball as well. And I'm sure, even though I don't watch soccer or know anything about it, that it probably happens there as well. But in football, as an example, when Des Bryant is on the field, all eyes are on Des. Very few teams ignore him when he lines up. And part of the reason is because he's a pretty significant deep threat. Now, there are others in the league who are more likely a deep threat. There are those who are more consistent at catching the ball and stronger with run after the catch. But even at Dez's level, which is pretty doggone good, he doesn't take the field unnoticed. When he takes the field, most of the time an announcer mentions, and Dez is on the far left or Dez is on the far right. Because there's something about knowing that he's on the field that changes the dynamic of the way the enemy, the opposing team, responds to the play, whatever the play is. And sometimes the strategy of the offensive coach is to say, I know if I put him far enough out there, it's going to thin the defense in the middle, which might give me a better chance to run. But if I don't have a good runner, then there's really no threat of that. I mean, who gets intimidated by a runner that can't run more than 2 or 3 yards anyway? But if you have a threat like a Zeke Elliott who can break through the line and take off down the field, then there's pretty significant reason to be concerned about, well, you've got this deep threat on the outside and this run threat in the middle, and where are we going to put our resources to try to stop both? And then you got a Beasley who can pop up out of the slot and break across the field, and it's like chasing a squirrel because he's so small and so fast. And I know you're thinking, what does that have anything to do with the text on the screen? What does that have to do with what you said in the description was going to be the content of this video? You know, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned some things that I heard, and I believe it was Ben Shapiro who first put them out there. Dennis Prager has since reinforced them, and others as well, that there is a way to cure poverty. And that is to get married before you have babies, to finish high school, and to get a job. And yet, some of the organizations I work with that deal directly with poverty and the challenges of just surviving in this world, and may not even be homelessness, just trying to get from 1 week to the next, raising a family of 3 or 4. You know, the number today, the income number requirement for a family to just make it, to keep a place to live, to keep food on the table, to keep the basic bills paid, to keep basic transportation, at least one car for the family to get around with. Takes about $52,000 a year. That's $1,000 a week. And do the math on that, and you're talking about a $25 an hour job necessary to be able for one person to support the family, or 2 people with a $12.50 an hour job. I'm not a believer that raising the minimum wage is necessarily going to change that. But I am asking this question. If there is an enemy of families, if there is an enemy of the success of our culture and our society as it has been for the last couple hundred years, why would that enemy work so hard to leave families as single-parent families? You know, if you look across all 50 of the United States, all 250 of the top most populated cities, the poverty families, the families that are living below the expectations of a solid financial family, are predominantly single females. Look up the stats if you don't believe me. Predominantly single females who are mothers. Those are the majority of poverty families. Now, there are many who are veteran men, veteran women who have come back and just not been able to get life right after war. But the majority of those who are seeking shelter, seeking assistance, seeking financial aid, seeking a place to stay, seeking security for their family are single mothers. And I have to ask to me, the elephant in the room kind of a question. Where's the father of those children? Is there more than one father? And if so, how'd that happen? But if there's one father of those children, why isn't he in the picture? I think the too obvious to answer question, or too obvious answer to the question is, well, he's not around because he wasn't worth keeping around. Well, that presents a challenge of a different sort, and that is, what makes a man worth not keeping around? Is it that he can't provide for his family, or he won't provide for his family, or he won't take care of his wife, or he doesn't love his kids? What causes that mom to choose to raise her kids on her own? How bad does a man have to be before the mother of her children will say to her children, we can do this without him? We're better off without the financial assistance of having a man in the house. We're better off without having the co-parenting ability to share the load of childcare, to share the responsibility of loving children, to share the responsibility of dirty diapers and nighttime feedings. I'm better off to do this by myself. How bad must a man be for a woman to make that choice? I'd love to hear your feedback on that. I'd love to see your comments down below, especially those of you who are single moms, who are facing that struggle every day, knowing that one paycheck, 1 week or two without a check, without a job, and disaster falls on you like nobody's business. Those of you who are living in that place, knowing that it only takes one car crash, impounding, one speeding ticket, one red light ticket, one I didn't get my car inspected ticket, and the amount of that ticket is more than you can pay. And it's just an immediate downhill spiral. I'd like to hear what it was about your man that made him worth getting rid of. And I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking the question. Because here's what I know. The enemy of the human race, on a spiritual level, comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. That's what the thief wants to do. And as the thief comes in against families to kill, to steal, and to destroy, he is very well known for setting up a double team on dad. He doesn't want dad in the play. In fact, he knows that the family is much easier to attack when dad is gone. When the father of your children is not in the picture, it's a whole lot easier to come against your children with anything from sexual abuse and sexual assault to attacks of pornography, attacks of poverty, attacks of disease, of abuse, of rage and violence and gangs and drugs and alcohol. When there's not a dad in the picture, your entire family is significantly more vulnerable to all of those things. And parenting all on its own, just one personality against the other, mom against daughter, mom against son, that's hard enough all by itself. But when the enemy brings an onslaught from the outside, like sexual assault, now you've got more to take on than you can possibly handle. It's like the double team or a triple team. And all of a sudden, that guy's out of the picture. And once he's out of the picture, the rest of the team is vulnerable. It's a whole lot easier to sack the quarterback when there's so much coverage downfield that you can't get rid of the ball. There's nobody to throw it to. But everybody else is already preoccupied trying to block. Now one or two come after the quarterback and he's going down. Mom, you're the quarterback. You're the one that's vulnerable. And if your best hope for financial security, if your best hope to defend your family against the wiles of the enemy, if your best hope is cast out of the house because he's a jerk, or because he's not financially responsible, or because he's got some kind of addiction that makes him a danger to keep in your home, it's time that we break up that double team. We've got to find some way to keep men in their homes, to help them be responsible fathers and responsible husbands. There's got to be some way that men can be prepared to be warriors for their home. They got to get their minds right. They got to get their hearts right. Every man who has fathered a child should have training in leadership. Every man who has fathered a child should have training in parenting. Every father, every man who has fathered a child should have biblical understanding of what it means to be a real man. That's not easy to come by, but it's worthwhile. Whether you need to get in a discipleship class or a leadership class, or simply go to a church and find a good Sunday school class, you need to get some training as a man who has fathered a child on what it means to be a dad. Because our families don't stand a chance without you there. They don't. Poverty will overwhelm them. Poverty will eat them up and spit them out. And guess what we'll have for the next generation? Young boys who become men, who father children, and don't stay around to raise them. As the infamous Jake Paul says, it's every day, bro. Once that child is here, it's your responsibility until they turn 18. You don't have the right to bail just because it's inconvenient. You don't have the right to run just because you're scared. We're all scared. Trust me, I've raised 4 of them. Still got 2 at home. We're almost done. But now we got 7 grandkids. It's every day, bro. It never changes. It's not going to stop. And as long as they're on this earth alive and breathing, if you fathered them, you're responsible for them. Don't try to back out. Don't try to run away. You call yourself tough because you're a gangster, you're a fool. You call yourself tough because you can make it on your own, you're a fool. You can't make it on your own. If you want to know what's tough, stick in there. Stay in the ring. Fight through until that kid graduates from high school and gets off on his own or her own. Stay in there and fight off the drug attacks. Stay in there and fight off the sexual abuse. Stay in there and fight off the violence, the gangs. You want to know what it takes to be a real man? Strapping on a sidearm and going out in the street getting revenge on somebody else, that isn't the answer. Be a real man by getting on your knees and praying for your family. Be a real man by standing up and making sure they get an education so they don't repeat the same cycle. Be a real man by teaching what it means to be a real man, being responsible for your family. Stay in the fight. Do what you got to do. And do it until it's done. Not just till you feel like you've finished or you're out of the fight because you're tired. Parenting doesn't give you the space to throw in the towel. Parenting is an all-out fight for at least 18 years. Back in the ring. You may have to apologize. You have to admit to her that you've done wrong, that you are a scumbag and you need to change. But if you fathered a child, you need to get involved in their life. You need to dig in, plant your heels, and fight at least until they're 18, and they can do it on their own. Chances are, if you spend enough time around them to prevent the onslaught of drugs and violence and gangs and lack of education and childhood pregnancy or teen pregnancy, if you stay in the fight long enough to get past that, you're probably going to have a friend in that child. Someone that you love and you care about more than just your parental obligation. It's a pretty strong prediction, I know. It's pretty good evidence that it's true. But for a man who's out there calling himself a leader, an entrepreneur, a business leader, a thought leader, a coach, and he's not being a responsible parent, no. In fact, if you have a coach or a mentor or a leader who is an unresponsive and uninvolved father, find another coach. Pretty significant advice from Scripture says if a man can't take care of his own house, he can't be trusted with anything else. Oh, yeah, it's hard. When my son called me at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night and said, my car got impounded. I didn't have the extra money for that. But I also knew the downside of him not having his car meant not getting to work. meant not getting to school. I had to make sacrifices to get his car out of impound, and I made him pay it back. And like a responsible young man, he did. He skipped his homecoming dance, his own homecoming dance, to go DJ at somebody else's because I was out of the state. Oddly enough, the event paid exactly what he owed me. Yeah, he used my equipment. Yeah, he did it under my business name, and et cetera, et cetera. But he did all the work, and he skipped his own dance to be able to pull it off. That's what I expected him. That's the hard part of parenting. The tough relationships, the depression that children face today, the stress and anxiety of school and everything else that comes down on them. That's the hard part of parenting. But if you're calling yourself a leadership coach or any other kind of life coach, and you're not being a responsible parent, shame on you. I'm just going to say it. If you're not living up to being the man or the woman that you're intended to be, and you're bowing out of your responsibilities, I'm not sure your advice is solid for anybody else to be following. It's just my 2 cents. And if you're looking for a life coach or a leadership coach or an advisor, ask some of those tough questions before you hire them. Have you done what you're claiming that you're going to help me to do? Because I'll tell you, they don't double team the third string receiver. They just don't. The enemy isn't concerned with someone who has no effectiveness. The enemy isn't concerned with someone who isn't going to make a difference. If dad's in the picture, he's going to get double teamed. The enemy's going to do everything he can to take him out. Drugs, alcohol, illicit relationships, pornography, fights at home, too much time at work. The enemy's going to do all he can to take him out because he knows if dad is there, this family has a greater chance of survival. Statistical fact. Look it up. My challenge to you today is to ask the question, if you're the mom, what makes him so bad that you feel like you should be better off to do it on your own? And if you're the dad, what makes you so bad that she wants to get rid of you? Or what could you do to stay involved, to be a responsible husband and father? What part of you has to change to be the man the enemy fears? I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.